Jasmine Crockett remained stock-still backstage, her heart rate even despite the gravity of the situation. From behind the monitor, she observed Pam Bondi, assertively speaking to the congressional committee, alleging, "Democrats have been lying to the American people for years." The cameras recorded Bondi's self-satisfied smile as she said, "No one has the courage to challenge me with actual fact." Unbeknownst to her, Congresswoman Crockett had been preparing for weeks for this exact moment. Armed with information nobody knew she would be, the committee room was filled with tension as Bondi pressed on with her testimony, Republican members nodding in agreement, seemingly another win for the former Florida Attorney General. But then things shifted. The committee chair announced the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas. Ms. Crockett for 5 minutes of questioning. What happened next left everyone in the room completely speechless. Crockett walked to her seat, calmly arranged a folder of documents, and looked directly at Bondi. The silence in the room was electric as Crockett began speaking, her voice clear and unwavering. "Miss Bondi, you've made some bold claims today. I have evidence here that will prove every single one of them false. Are you prepared to explain yourself to the American people?" Bundy's confident smile faltered for just a moment, a flash of uncertainty that cameras caught and would soon spread across social media. No one expected what was about to unfold in the next 5 minutes. A takedown so thorough and brutal that political analysts would be discussing it for months to come, before diving deeper into this extraordinary confrontation. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you won't miss our latest political analysis. Now let's break down exactly how Congresswoman Crockett orchestrated one of the most devastating takedowns in recent political history. Pam Bondi had been dominating political talk shows in congressional hearings for months, her reputation as a fierce defender of conservative policies growing with each appearance. As Florida's former Attorney General and a prominent legal voice, Bondi carried herself with the confidence of someone who rarely faced meaningful opposition. Her slick presentations and aggressive rhetoric had made her a favorite among conservative media, where she would regularly make bold claims that went largely unchallenged. The hearing that day was supposed to be another victory lap. Bondi had been invited by Republicans to testify on government accountability, and she came armed with her usual arsenal of attacks against Democrats. The committee room was packed with news cameras lined up to capture what many expected to be simply another day of partisan theater. But in the wings waited Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the freshman representative from Texas, who had quietly been building a reputation for her razor-sharp legal mind. Before entering politics, Crockett had been an accomplished civil rights attorney, with a gift for dismantling flawed arguments. Unlike many of her colleagues, Crockett didn't seek the spotlight. She preferred to do her homework, gather facts, and strike only when she had overwhelming evidence. "She's been preparing for this moment for weeks," whispered one of Crockett's staffers to a colleague. "He hasn't slept more than 4 hours a night, reviewing documents, checking sources, building an airtight case." What made this confrontation particularly significant wasn't just the clash of personalities. It represented something far more important. Bondi had been spreading misinformation that had real consequences for policy decisions affecting millions of Americans. If left unchallenged, her testimony today would likely be cited in upcoming legislation. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The committee room represented a stark visual contrast between the two women. Bondi sat confidently at the witness table, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing an expensive designer suit that projected authority and power. She had arrived with an entourage of assistants, carrying her briefing books, a small army supporting her testimony. Crockett, by comparison, sat among her fellow committee members, less flashy but intensely focused. While Bondi had brought an entourage, Crockett had brought something far more dangerous. Fact. As the chair recognized Congresswoman Crockett for her 5 minutes of questioning, the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted. Those familiar with Crockett's work straightened in their seats, suddenly paying closer attention. Something unexpected was about to happen, and everyone in that room was about to witness a moment that would reverberate throughout Washington for months to come. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Crockett began, her voice calm but firm. "Miss Bondi, I've been listening carefully to your testimony today, and I have several questions about the claims you've made." Di nodded confidently, clearly expecting the standard partisan back and forth that usually characterize these hearings. "Of course, Congresswoman, I'm happy to clarify anything you didn't understand." The subtle condescension in Bondi's tone didn't go unnoticed. Several committee members exchanged glances, and a few staffers in the back of the room raised their eyebrows. But Crockett remained unfazed. Let's start with your claim that the previous administration had, and I quote, the strongest job creation record in American history, Crockett said, opening a folder in front of her. Are you standing by that statement? Absolutely, Bondi replied without hesitation. The numbers don't lie, Crockett nodded thoughtfully. I agree that numbers don't lie. That's why I'm confused by your statement. She pulled out a document and slid it into the projector. Suddenly a chart appeared on screens throughout the room. This data comes directly from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. As you can see, job creation during the administration you're praising actually ranks 5th in modern history, not 1st. Bondi's smile tightened slightly. Well, Congresswoman, if you look at the specific sectors I was referencing, I'm looking at the exact transcript of your statement on Fox News last week. Crockett interrupted, producing another document. You made no mention of specific sector. You claimed it was, and again, I quote, the strongest job creation record in American history, period. That statement is demonstrably false. The room grew quieter. Republican committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the typical grandstanding they were accustomed to. Crockett was methodically dismantling Bondi's claims with precise evidence. Let's move on, Crockett continued, not giving Bondi time to regroup. You also stated that crime rates skyrocketed under Democratic leadership in major cities. I have here the FBI uniform crime reports for the past decade. Another document appeared on the screen. As you can see, violent crime rates have actually decreased in 7 of the 10 largest Democrat-led cities over the time period you referenced. Bondi tried to interject. If you cherry-pick certain statistics, these aren't cherry-picked, Miss Bondi. Crockett replied firmly. These are the comprehensive official crime statistics that law enforcement agencies themselves report. Are you suggesting the FBI is publishing false data? A murmur rippled through the audience. Bondi's face flushed slightly as she realized the trap she was in. Deny the data, and she'd be questioning the credibility of law enforcement agencies. Her own party staunchly defended, accepted, and she'd have to admit her claims were false before Bondi could formulate a response. Crockett pressed forward. Now the most troubling claim you made today involves election security. You stated that there were, and I quote, thousands of verified cases of election fraud in the last presidential election. The tension in the room was palpable. Now this was entering politically charged territory I have here. Crockett continued, the official reports from election officials in all 50 states, including those led by Republican administrations. She held up a thick stack of documents. The actual number of verified fraud cases was 74 nationwide, not thousands, and only 12 of those were significant enough to potentially affect any outcome. All in local races, not national ones. Bondi's confident demeanor was cracking. She glanced toward Republican committee members, seemingly hoping for intervention, but they were stunned into silence by the methodical presentation of evidence. Miss Bondi, Crockett urged, her measured tone now imperative, but unmistakable in its urgency. You're a retired attorney general. You know the significance of proper testimony, and yet within the last 30 minutes alone, I've pinpointed 3 significant assertions you've made, which are verifiably inaccurate, based on official government statistics. The committee chair, perceiving momentum rapidly turning, tried to interrupt the gentlewoman's time. I still have 2 minutes left, Mr. Chairman, Crockett answered without looking away from Bondi. The chair, glancing at the clock, gestured reluctantly. What happened next stunned statement in the room, and would soon spread like wildfire throughout the country. Crockett produced one last document, an email that came on screen, with Bond's name prominently displayed in the sender field. Miss Bondi, can you verify whether that is your email from March 15th last year? Crockett questioned. Bondi glared at the screen, her face momentarily going white. The email displayed messages between Bondi and a network producer that included a line reading, "The data doesn't support our narrative, but let's go with the talking points anyway. Viewers won't fact-check." The room exploded into gasps. Reporters scrambled to type on their phones. Democrats sat up in shock, and Republicans were astounded. This was no longer a political disagreement. This was proof of intentional misinformation. A day that email is being taken out of context. Bond stuttered, her demeanor totally ruined. The entire email chain is open to the committee's reading. Crockett answered, "Isolate. I am merely inquiring if you penned these words." The atmosphere in the room was one of high tension. All eyes were on Bondi, waiting for his answer as he fought to get the words out after being so sure of himself and in control as a former attorney general. All was set for the most critical moment of the hearing. The moment when Jasmine Crockett would deliver the finishing blow that would silence Pam Bondi and shift both of their political paths for good. As Bondi struggled for an answer, Crockett took the opportunity that would be watched and rewatched a million times on social media and news outlets. Leaning forward slightly, her voice firm and assured, "Miss Bondi, let me remind you that you're under oath before this committee." Crockett asked, "Did you send this email telling your staff to employ talking points that you yourself recognized as being refuted by the facts?" The committee room went dead silent. Even the normal background rustle of paper stopped. Everyone's eyes were on Bondi, whose polished veneer had cracked, sweat visibly beaded on her forehead, as she caught on that the trap was shut around her. "I would have to go back and read the context of that communication," Bond responded weakly. "The context is fairly clear on the complete thread," Crockett answered, inserting the full email chain into the record. "You clearly admitted that the evidence wasn't backing up your public assertions, and then instructed your staff to go ahead and make them anyhow, labeling it as narrative and not fact reporting." Crockett then performed a masterful flip in tone, the voice lowering marginally as she uttered the line that would ultimately become a political mantra. "Miss Bond, you've made your career lying to the American people and accusing others of it. But the facts indicate you're the one who has been intentionally spreading false information. The distinction is, I didn't just accuse you, I brought receipts." The chamber exploded. Democratic members couldn't help their response, some actually audibly gasping, others desperately whispering to aid. Republican lawmakers sat in stunned silence, aghast at the deliberate deconstruction they had just experienced. Inside the press bench, journalists were already typing furious headlines. Receipts were instantly ricocheted on social media sites. Crockett brought receipts, and Bondi silenced, began trending in a matter of seconds. Video clips of the confrontation were being distributed quicker than sites could tally views. But Crockett was not done. With great calm, she confronted the committee chairman. "Mr. Chairman, considering that Ms. Bond's testimony seems to include several clearly false statements, as I've outlined with official government statistics, and considering the evidence indicating she knowingly gave information she knew was inaccurate, I move that her entire testimony be removed from the record as not reliable and possibly perjurious." The chairman, clearly uncomfortable, referred to his aides for advice. It was not a routine procedural motion. It was a damning indictment presented with the skill of a seasoned trial lawyer. In addition, Crockett went on, "I call on the committee to formally refer this issue to the Department of Justice for investigation into possible perjury before Congress," and legal background informed her fully of the gravity of this turn of events. Her face, once flushed with embarrassment, now drained of color completely. The former prosecutor had suddenly become the defendant, and the evidence against her was damning. Republican committee members finally found their voices, attempting to call points of order and procedural objections, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The image of Bondi, once so smug and accusatory, now silent and defensive, was burned into the brains of everyone tuned in. Crockett, in perfect control, took her last few seconds to give the kubra. "Miss Bondi has spent years accusing others of deceiving the American people. Today the American people saw where the true deception is. And in contrast to much of Miss Bondi's rhetoric, what I've shown you today isn't partisan talk, it's fact on the record." As the chairman's ramble came down pronouncing that the time had run out for Crockett, the damage was done. Within 5 minutes, Jasmine Crockett hadn't just debunked Bondi's accusations, but had systematically dismantled her credibility with clinical precision. And she had done it not with partisan vitriol but with unassailable proof and Bondi's own testimony. The political universe had just seen something unusual and potent, an instant of true accountability served up with such accuracy and evidence that spin would be powerless to unravel the damage. As Bondi remained silently seated at the witness table, clearly shaken, it was apparent to all that they had just witnessed a moment that would define a career, though not the one Bondi had been expecting when she confidently walked into the hearing room that morning. The fallout from Crockett's 5-minute tirade was instant and seismic. As the committee voted to take a 15-minute recess, Bondi was surrounded immediately by her staff, their faces set, as they confronted in hushed tones. The former Attorney General, who had been so commanding and authoritative, now appeared small, shaking her head over and over again, as aides demonstrated the explosion of reactions on their phones. In the corridors outside the hearing room, reporters rushed to get their stories. The story had fully turned around from what had been expected that morning. Instead of another forum for Bondi's allegations, the hearing had been the site of her public humiliation. "I've been reporting on Congress for 20 years," one grizzled reporter was heard telling another, "and I've never seen anything like that." Crockett didn't win an argument. She systematically took apart someone's whole public persona, using facts they couldn't challenge. Within an hour, the video of the exchange had gone viral across all the major social media. The tags Crockett, Cliprock, Bondi silenced were taking over trending lists across the country. Clips highlighting various points from the exchange were being shared in millions. Crockett creating the official stats, the exposure of the damning email, and most notably her heart-wrenching line about bringing receipt. News channels scrambled to revise their coverage. What had promised to be simple partisan testimony now was the political news of the month. Churin's flashing Bondi exposed in Crockett's receipt illuminated screens, as commentators and analysts picked apart each second of the exchange. By nightfall, the effect had diffused far outside of political circles. Late-night talk shows were scrambling to rewrite their monologue. Memes depicting Crockett as a variety of movie characters, giving knockout punches, filled the internet. Even celebrities that never spoke out about politics were posting the video with titles such as "This is how you deal with misinformation" and "Watch and learn." The next day, the newspaper headlines were telling the news. Crockett brings receipts. Congresswoman's proof shuts down Bondi. 5 minutes of anger. How Jasmine Crockett methodically destroyed Pam Bondi. The receipts don't lie. Bondi could face perjury probe after congressional hearing. From prosecutor to defendant, Bondi's credibility crisis following Crockett confrontation. The political fallout was quick and severe. News outlets that had commonly included Bondi as a commentator suddenly found themselves in a bind. A number of them canceled her planned appearances, citing programming shifts. Others who retained her on their docket faced withering criticism from viewers demanding they do and explain for why they would continue to platform someone whose credibility had been so soundly impeached. For Crockett, the effect was as dramatic but opposite. The freshman congresswoman, whose name was hitherto known mainly by her constituents and serious congressional political followers, was overnight a national name. Her office was filled with requests for interviews. Top Democratic leaders publicly commended her preparation and accuracy. What Representative Crockett had shown wasn't political posturing. House Minority leaders said to newsmen, she displayed what effective oversight is all about: serious research, exacting questioning, and adherence to fact over partisan talking points. Most importantly, attorneys started opining about the possible legal ramifications of Bondi's testifying. Past federal prosecutors were seen on TV discussing the gravity of possible perjury charges. Law professors penned op-eds regarding the moral responsibilities of lawyers when they make public comments. The issue had moved beyond politics and into the area of professional and legal responsibility. 3 days after the hearing, the story took another twist when more emails materialized from the same string Crockett had produced. The messages indicated Bondi was cautioned by her own researchers that her assertions were factually inaccurate, but she had pressed on with them nonetheless, making it clear that narrative trumps nitpicking over data. Social media blew up again with a fresh wave of reaction. The term narrative matters more than nitpicking over data was instantly memed to ridicule any such patent attempt to do away with inconvenient facts. A week later, the first tangible professional repercussions started to show. A top law school revoked an invitation for Bondi to appear as a guest lecturer on ethics in public service. Their excuse diplomatically mentioned scheduling conflicts, but all knew the actual reason for Bondi. Personally, the effect was crushing. Sources familiar with her reported that she had postponed several appearances and withdrawn from the public eye to rethink her messaging strategy. An open attempt at damage control that only gave rise to more condemnation. Political pundits came to speak of the Crockett effect, a fresh exhaustion among public figures for fear of making blanket assertions that may be verifiably challenged. Congressional committees noticed witnesses coming before them with much more documentation and clear language, desperate not to become the next Bondi. Congresswoman Crockett, on the other hand, managed her sudden fame with typical precision. Instead of taking a victory lap, she leveraged her added platform to bring policy issues into focus. In her first major interview after the hearing, when asked about the confrontation, she simply said, "My job isn't to create viral moments. My job is to ensure that the American people receive accurate information upon which policy decisions are made." When someone testifies before Congress, they have an obligation to tell the truth, especially when they've spent years accusing others of lying. The contrast between the two women's trajectories could not have been more stark. Bondi, the one-time up-and-comer, whose aggressive allegations made headlines, had been exposed as cavalier with facts and ready to sacrifice accuracy for narrative. Crockett, previously recognizable only to attentive watchers of Congress, had become a fierce advocate of evidence-based accountability. 1 month later, the committee unanimously voted to refer Bondi to the Department of Justice to investigate for possible perjury. Although legal analysts pointed out that such probes hardly ever lead to prosecutions, the damage to reputation was immeasurable. The lady who had made her reputation by accusing others of lying was now to be officially questioned about her own honesty. The tale of Pam Bondi and Jasmine Crockett was more than a social media splash. It had become a case study in the potency of preparation, the utility of evidence-based discussion, and the possible repercussions when public officials opt for story rather than fact. Congressional hearing rooms evidenced a subtle shift. Witnesses seemed more guarded, more careful with words, more scrupulous to maintain a distinction between opinion and fact. Some staffers had taken to whispering a new warning to prepare their principals before potentially contentious hearing. Remember, Bondi, Crockett might be watching. 6 months later, a political science professor summarized the impact in a widely shared analysis. What made Crockett's confrontation with Bondi so significant wasn't just the dramatic nature of the exchange. It was that it represented something increasingly rare in our political discourse, one that had seen well-researched facts conclusively overcome assertive but unsubstantiated assertion. Within 5 minutes, Crockett had shown the long-lasting strength of evidence in an age that was sometimes characterized by fiction. The Crockett brought receipts moment had become part of the political vocabulary invoked whenever somebody approached exceptionally well-armed to counter misinformation. Bondi, on the other hand, had witnessed her public persona reduced to nearly nothing. Her frequent public appearances decreased to amicable platforms where she would not have to deal with tough questioning regarding her credibility. It was a harsh reminder about how quickly things can turn around in politics, and how one well-demented confrontation can irrevocably change courses. Jasmine Crockett had shut Pam Bondi down, not with more vehement shouting or flamboyant accusations, but with something immensely stronger: irrefutable facts presented with precision and poise. If you enjoyed this analysis of political accountability, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for additional in-depth analysis of the most pivotal moments in American politics. Tap the notification bell to get notified when we release our next video, discussing who will be the next public figure to get hit with the Crockett treatment. Because in modern politics, receipts are more important